It's almost a household name in the gaming space. Borderlands is one of those series I find myself revisiting when I get sick of whatever I've been playing at the time. My most recent playthrough of Borderlands 2 is actually thanks to a good friend of mine. You see, he started the game about 18 different times with people, and they all would burn out by the time they finally reached Sanctuary. So I decided to start a real playthrough so my buddy could actually finish the game. And after we started, I realized how much this series has impacted the shooter genre, and it really got me thinking about how crazy popular some of the Borderlands games are years after their release. I mean, just take a look at the player count for Borderlands 2 from last year. But anyway, let's take a journey back in time to the Borderlands, how Pandora shaped the looter shooter. Of course, this video can't be an essay about a hyper-specific topic unless I spend a gratuitous amount of time discussing the history of Borderlands. Because, context matters. Borderlands was nothing more than an idea in the minds of Randy Pitchford and the folks at Gearbox all the way back in 2005. Yes, that Randy Pitchford. He had been playing a lot of RPGs, notably games like Diablo 2 and Ultima, and he wanted to do the unthinkable, well, at least for the time. Pitchford wanted to create a video game that mixed the core elements of both role-playing games and first-person shooters. Having worked on a DLC for a little indie shooter called Half-Life, I don't know if you've heard of it, he wanted to blend the in-depth leveling and loot systems of RPGs with the high-octane, free-flow gameplay of shooters. At this point, Gearbox would develop Borderlands and eventually release a trailer in 2007, and Jesus Christ, what is that? I gotta be honest, I had never seen the original Borderlands trailer, but man, this is an entirely different direction. Imagine if this is what Borderlands looked like at launch. I don't really think it would have been pretty, and I wasn't the only person that thought this either. The general consensus after viewing the original trailer was that Borderlands looked a lot too much like Fallout 3 or Rage. Subjectively a good or bad point, but they looked really similar. Also at this point, Gearbox was in a bit of a pickle. They had to figure out how to make their games stand out like a sore thumb from the rest of their competition. And lucky for them, an art producer had the solution they were all looking for. Brian Martell knew that the deadline for Borderlands was fast approaching, and he needed to come up with a solution fast. And that's when it hit him right in the face. Martell had been reviewing some of the original concept art sheets and had a major breakthrough. What if we made Borderlands look like a comic book? With inspiration in hand, Martell rushed into one of the studio work closets to create a proof of concept away from prying eyes, and after some time, he was able to show his work to the rest of the team. Okay, this is where the development story gets kind of crazy. So allegedly, Brian Martell showed Borderlands with the new cel-shaded-esque comic book art style. Wait for it, everybody loves it. Randy Pitchford loves it. Even Take-Two, the game's publisher, loved the new art style. And subsequently, almost the whole studio is reinvigorated and helps to implement the new graphics into the game. But not everyone loved the change. Apparently, while literally everyone else was on board and praising Martell's new vision for Borderlands, the original art director was not very happy. They were so disenchanted, apparently, that they not only left Gearbox and dropped off of the Borderlands project, but they quit the games industry as a whole. Rest in peace, noble art director. Maybe in an alternative timeline, your vision for Borderlands would have succeeded. Anyway, 2009 would roll around along with the release of Borderlands, and lucky for Gearbox, the game did phenomenally. Borderlands would sell over 2 million copies by December of 2009, only 3 months after launch, and would continue to sell 4.5 million copies by August of 2011. And this was no small feat for Gearbox, as 2 other very large FPS games would release the same year as Borderlands. They went up against the releases of Halo ODST in September and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 in November. Borderlands selling that many copies while facing off against 2 titans of the shooter genre is pretty dang impressive, and this would shape the game's fate for the future. Now let's actually talk about Borderlands 1 for a sec. While the impact the first game left on everyone is pretty glaringly obvious now in 2023, I'd be lying if I said it was a perfect game. And this is where the rose-tinted glasses come off. I really forgot how clunky Borderlands 1 feels at times. found myself getting stuck on all manner of different things and having to spam the space bar to get out of a jam. Not to mention, there's only sprint and crouch. There's no ground pound, mantle, or sliding. You can sprint and reload, which is really good, but that's about it. Having abilities like mantling and sliding aren't really things I think about much anymore, but at least for me, it feels kind of strange to play older first-person shooters where you don't have these kind of niche movement options. Speaking of reloading and sprinting while reloading, the guns in this game are, they're okay. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really fun weapons to use in Borderlands 1, but a lot of the guns don't have that crazy visual flair that the series is known for. Not only the weapons, but a lot of the color palette is brown and gray, which in my opinion isn't entirely a bad thing. Some of the set pieces and backgrounds are stunning, and they really evoke a sense of dusty mystery and wonder. The story, on the other hand, is not one to remember. But you might say, well, the premise is great, and I'd agree. A team of treasure hunters lured in by fame and fortune, only to be met with conflict around every turn, is a good start. But the rest of the story leaves a lot to be desired. Most of the characters, except for Tannis, they're not really fleshed out with proper backstories, and all she got were a couple of echo logs. And the main villain, if we can call her that, sucks.
And within minutes have started killing the locals and causing a disturbance.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And there's no real payoff with the ending. Like, the Vault Hunters get to the vault, whoop-de-doo, but they're beaten there by Atlas and Commandant Steele. But she immediately gets eaten by the Devourer. And it really pisses me off that we as the player didn't get to have this epic showdown and boss fight with Steele. Instead, she gets vored by the final boss like some fucking bozo. Speaking of bosses, the design for some of the main game bosses are very safe, let's call it. This is purely my own opinion, but bosses like Baron Flint, Sledge, and McCloud are just a handful of bosses that are just white guys in the fucking desert. Also, really quick, I really wish Gearbox had recorded more lines for the bandits you fight throughout most of the game. I have to hear, "All right, boys, let's take them out. One more goddamn time." Now, I've been digging into Borderlands 1 pretty hard, but there's a lot of great things about the game. First off, the second wind system is a super helpful mechanic for an idiot like me. Having the chance to self-res in the middle of a group fight or boss is a great mechanic to keep gameplay exciting instead of just dying and having to restart from a checkpoint or save state. Fire guns and anything that can do massive dot are amazing, since you can get res without even having to shoot the suckers to death. It'll do it for you. Combat itself is also pretty fluid and what you would want out of an FPS. Shooting guns is really fun, which is good because that's what you're going to do for 99% of the game. My favorite loop is swapping to a shotgun, running up to a poor, unsuspecting bandit, and barrel stuffing around into his now disintegrated cranium. It never gets old.
Nice throw.
The weapons are also the main part of the grind. As you keep playing, better guns drop, allowing for more damage and better loadouts. And also, not to mention, but Borderlands has the best weapon system in any looter shooter. I don't care what you think. Weapons in Borderlands 1 are composed of parts that are assembled by different companies. Each of the weapon parts determine how a particular weapon functions. For example, I could have two ogres drop, and while they would both have the same explosive trait, the reload, stability, handling, and the damage would vary greatly. This is so stinking cool. The fact that you can grind for the exact parts you want to find the god roll is rad as hell. The weapons part system is so cool because how it kind of provides a bit of context and storytelling for the world. Instead of just, having a sword or having a pistol and seeing the stat distribution on screen, you can look at the different parts and how they actually impact the weapon, how they make you reload faster, how they make you more stable when using the gun. It creates almost a little bit of storytelling in itself, which I can't really believe I'm saying. Also, build crafting with the 4 characters is pretty fun. I've been having a really good time playing Lilith and watching every poor sucker on screen melt into a pile of goop every time I jam my pointer finger into the F key. While the skill trees are not nearly as fleshed out as the rest of the games in the series, I still think you can find some different playstyles between each of the characters. While Borderlands is not the perfect game, I do believe that it left a huge impact on the industry. Its success, in my opinion, can be attributed to a handful of reasons. First off, the marketing was really good. There are a lot of great and memorable commercials and tons of posters and trailers about the weapons and the guns and what little there was of the story. And in my opinion, it hyped everybody up. I was super hyped all the way back in 2009 when the game came out, and I was in middle school. Almost like a purple cow in a sea of white and black, if you ask me. The visual flair brought players to the game, but everyone stayed because of the fun. You see, I'm 99% sure that Borderlands was the first official looter shooter, or at least was the first really popular one.
Editing Sleepy here, I just wanted to technically mention a game called Hellgate London. It was developed by former devs who worked on Diablo and Diablo 2, and while I never played Hellgate London, after some brief review, there is an argument that it could be considered the first looter shooter. Hellgate had full RPG systems like subclasses, skill trees, and randomized loot, but it also came along with procedurally generated dungeons. But most importantly, it could toggle between a first-person and a third-person camera. I don't know enough about Hellgate London myself, but from what I have read and watched, it seems to me like it could be considered the first true looter shooter. Have you played Hellgate London? And do you really think it's the first looter shooter? But back to the video.
Introducing RPG elements like leveling up, a massive loot pool, and grinding to your heart's content added a lot to Borderlands in addition to the FPS action. Not to mention 4-player co-op, split screen, and scaling difficulty to bring you and your friends together. But most importantly, Borderlands proved to the industry that mixing RPG and FPS elements was not only possible, but it was really, really fun. Now, at this point, Borderlands had been out for a few years, and it wasn't only a smash hit, but it also made the studio a lot of money. So it would only make sense that Gearbox would start work on a sequel to the first game. But of course, the stakes this time were much higher. General consensus about Borderlands 1 is that the game was good, but the story fell short, along with players wanting a whole lot more. Also, Gearbox had to take resources away from other projects they were working on and diverted everything to the development of Borderlands 2. If they were going to make this game, it better be a great sequel. Then in 2012, 3 years after Borderlands 1, Borderlands 2 would be released. And once again, Gearbox found itself among fierce competition. 2012 would mark the release of Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Halo 4, Far Cry 3, and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, all fantastic and influential shooters in their own right. But once again, Borderlands 2 would defy expectations. Borderlands 2 was the most pre-ordered game in 2K's history, and it sold more than 1.8 million copies within its first month of launch, passing Borderlands 1 in sales in 2014 with over 8 million units sold. Borderlands 2 is the real deal. Gearbox decided to pull all the stops and delivered on almost everything to make a great sequel. Sick of the drab colors? Explore new environments from icy glaciers to a Hyperion super city. Want more guns? Well, there's a bazillion new guns, and each company has their own unique parts and gimmicks to really make them stand out from each other. Like, Hyperion weapons increase stability the longer you fire the gun, or use a Teodor and toss it like a grenade when the mag's empty, or to digistruct a new one in the palm of your hands. And don't forget the loads of new content. Borderlands 2 released 4 main DLCs, 6 Headhunter packs, and a free DLC in 2019 to catch up everyone on the story before the launch of Borderlands 3. You can even play as 4 brand new classes, or 6 if you buy a DLC, with massive skill trees to boot. All in all, Gearbox took a lot of the suggestions and feedback from their first game and cranked everything to 11. But most importantly, one of the biggest changes, and one of the most impactful changes, was the story. Borderlands 2 has a much more compelling narrative. Character interactions feel way more fleshed out and really help make the world feel alive. My favorite part of the story was the inclusion of all 4 of the original playable characters from the first game as main characters in the story. From Mordecai being a drunk marksman to Roland leading the Crimson Raiders, each of the 4 have their own impact on the greater picture. But who can talk about Borderlands 2's story without mentioning one of the most infamous modern video game villains ever, Handsome Jack?
Don't get me wrong, it's cute that y'all think you're the heroes of this little adventure, but you're not.
If Commandant Steele is arguably one of the worst, then Jack has to be one of the best. He's charming, charismatic, but also just as evil and menacing.
Oh, this is so frustrating. You see, this is what I don't get about you bad guys. You know the hero's gonna win, but you just don't die quickly.
From the beginning cutscene, we know that he wants us dead and gone. As you play the game, you learn his story, his motivations for killing everyone, the hostile iridium mining on Pandora, and why he's gonna stop at nothing until every last bandit is dead. Handsome Jack is a great villain to hate. His actions really drive the story forward and kept me invested after every encounter, especially after killing Roland.
Son.
Eventually, this all comes to a point where the warrior is finally released and you've got to stop it. And of course you do, because you're the Vault Hunter, and of course you win. But getting to see Handsome Jack finally die is well worth the wait. Having a much more compelling narrative kept everyone engaged, because, well, we all wanted to see how the story would end. Borderlands 1 was fun only because of the gunplay, but Borderlands 2 is fun to play, but it also tells a pretty good story. But that's just the rest of it. Borderlands 2 is so much fun to play, even years later. I'd argue that Borderlands 2 is one of, if not the best looter shooter available right now.
You serious?
I'm serious. The gameplay loop is, well, exactly what you would expect from a looter shooter. You complete missions, level up, and acquire better and better gear. It's pretty simple, but therein lies the beauty of the game. If you wanted, you could have a very easy and laid-back playthrough, where you only complete the story and maybe a handful of side missions to stay at level. And while leveling up, you plug in abilities and pick up better weapons as you come across them. Or you could full send, complete multiple playthroughs on the same character, hit max level, build craft, and grind for every god roll that you ever need. Borderlands 2 is a game where you can really fall down the rabbit hole and learn all the cool interactions and never come back. It's the fact that the player has the choice to either play casually or take a deep dive into the build crafting system that really makes the game great. Build crafting and really sinking your teeth into specific perks and kill skills is incredibly rewarding, but so is just having a good time and listening to Shooter be a complete buffoon while blasting bandits. No matter how you choose to play, everyone can have a great time because you get to shoot the shit out of the bad guys. It's also pretty obvious that Borderlands 2 was the best game in the franchise and kicked off the creation of Borderlands the Pre-Sequel, Tales from the Borderlands, Borderlands 3, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, and new Tales from the Borderlands. But Borderlands 2 really showed that people will play a shooter with fast FPS action with its own RPG elements built in and continue to love it. I mean, Borderlands 2 has a pretty dedicated fan base. It's no Team Fortress 2, but still. Borderlands 2 brought so many good ideas that have made their way into other games. Most importantly, the introduction of leveling systems, stat values, loot out the ass, and skill trees into a first-person shooter. These ideas ultimately inspired a generation of games that are similar in their own right. Games like Destiny, The Division, and Warframe are just a few. Some of these titles have become massively popular in their own right and continue to show that people like looter shooters. But there's a newer game that I don't see talked about a lot that fits this category that, in my opinion, deserves a little more attention. And that game is Gunfire Reborn. Don't get me wrong, people love looter shooters. I mean, I haven't shut the fuck up about them since I started the video. But a big complaint that I hear about this genre is that getting to the endgame takes way too long. Gunfire Reborn fixes this issue because it mixes looter shooter mechanics with the breathtaking speed of roguelites. That's right, Gunfire Reborn is a true-to-form looter shooter roguelite, and it's mighty fun. Everything about the game is so fast compared to traditional RPGs and looter shooters. Think of it this way. If Risk of Rain is instant speed Diablo 2, then Gunfire Reborn is instant speed Borderlands 2. The only caveat to Gunfire is that it's hardcore furry bait. Jokes aside, this game is fucking fantastic. Each playable character has 2 abilities and 3 skill trees. At the end of each level, you pop up in a chest, and you can select a skill to acquire or upgrade. The best part, once you get a build going with the skill trees, the rest of the chest will give you new skills that synergize with your build, or skills you've already unlocked so you can upgrade your damage potential. And on top of that, a boatload of weapons and scrolls that provide bonus effects, and you've got a great game. Also, side note, the weapon design is really fucking cool. There's a shotgun where you feed fish to it and it has tons of eyes and a big fucking mouth. There's just lizards that shoot fire and you smack them to reload them. It's pretty fucking wild. Most importantly, the gameplay itself is really satisfying. The playable characters encompass a wide variety of different playstyles, Bandana Dog can dual wield like Salvador, and Turning Red from Pixar has an upgradable mech kind of like Gage and Deathtrap. Then there's Pink Lola Lopunny. She's my favorite to play, not because of hardcore horny, but because she can summon ghost swords every time you land a shot on an enemy. This quickly turns into picking up a submachine gun, marking enemies with her lotus petals, and sending a flurry of swords into a fucker's face. But if you get to the end of a run with any of these characters, you feel incredibly powerful, like you've been grinding Borderlands or Diablo for countless hours and you've reached that intense endgame where the power fantasy climaxes and you feel like a badass. But here's the thing, you can go from 0 to hero in what, 30, 40 minutes tops? You can reach that power fantasy that quickly in Gunfire? It's a quick and easy to digest looter shooter experience. And while I think Gunfire would have been made, even if Borderlands 2 didn't exist, it goes to show how much impact Borderlands has on newer games like Gunfire. But this is just one of many examples of a game that has iterated on some of the ideas that Borderlands brought to the table. Truly, Borderlands and its sequel inspired a generation and a half of games where players can meet at the intersections of FPS and RPG action. Ooh, Jesus. If you're still watching, thank you. I really appreciate it. I know I already made a video about this a little while ago, but I still can't believe the channel now has over 1,000 subs. When I started making these videos, I thought it would only be my friends and I who would watch these and find any entertainment. But apparently there's 1,000 folks who enjoy what I seem to be putting out. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for the support. It really does mean the world to me. Unrelated, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I've got more videos in the works. After writing and producing this video, I think I'm going to stick to mostly long-form essay content for now. I love listening to people do deep dives into their favorite and obscure topics, so I figured, why not? But I really like learning the history of Borderlands and connecting my own experiences to this bigger picture. But anyway, if you want to support the channel, all you gotta do is like and subscribe. Thanks one more time for 1,000 subs, and I'll catch you guys later.